All right, so our lesson objective for today, students will multiply and divide rational expressions. Yesterday we started with the multiplication. We're just going to do a few that are just a little bit more complicated than what we did yesterday. But we're still going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to factor it, and then we're going to reduce it and come up with the simplified answer. So our first problem, we've got 4x cubed plus 4x over 16y times 2y over 7x squared y plus 7y. So if I look at 4x cubed plus 4x, what's my greatest common factor there? 4. Can I take anything besides a 4 out? I can take an x out, can't I? All right, and then what's left in the parentheses? X squared plus 1. All right, and then I've got a 2y also on top. On the bottom, I've got the 16y, and then what is going to be the GCF for the 7x squared y plus 7y? 7y, so I take that out, and I'm left with x squared plus 1. All right, and then I just reduce it, so I see what's the same on the top and the bottom. So I've got a y and a y that I can cross out, an x squared plus 1 and an x squared plus 1. And I can reduce the 4 and the 16. 4 goes into itself once and 16 4 times. So now all that's left on top, oh wait, I'm not done. I've got a 2 over here and then the 4 here, so that becomes 2. Alright, so now all that's left is the x on top here, and then I have the 2 and the y and the 7 on the bottom. So multiplying across with what's left, I have x over 14y. Right. Any questions? All right, let's have you guys try one on your... Oh, no, I'm not going to make you try one yet. I lied. First, we'll do one more example before I have you try one. Okay, so now I've got n minus 5 over n squared plus 4n times n squared plus 8n plus 16 over n squared minus 3n minus 10. So it looks like a lot, but you guys already know how to do all this factoring, so it's not, even though it takes up a lot of space on your paper, it's really not a hard problem for you guys. Alright, so the n minus 5, nothing's going to happen there. What about my n squared plus 8n plus 16? Do I have a volunteer to factor that one? Matthew? N plus 4 and n plus 4. Alright, then on the bottom, what is my GCF for the n squared plus 4n? Adon, what do you think it is? What's my GCF for the n squared plus 4n?
N.
Just an n. And what am I left with in the parentheses?
N plus 4.
N plus 4. Okay, and then last we have the n squared minus 3n minus 10. Okay, so Jalen, what's that going to be? N squared minus 3n minus 10, right here.
N minus 5 and n plus 2.
Right, n minus 5 times n plus 2. Okay. Alright, and then I just go through and start crossing out what's the same on the top and the bottom. So I have an n minus 5 on the top and the bottom. I have an n plus 4 on the top and the bottom. Is there anything else I can reduce? What? Okay, I cannot reduce the 2 and the 4 because they're a package deal. They're in parentheses, they're attached to the n with a plus sign, so they can't be reduced, okay? That's a common misunderstanding though, so don't feel bad. Okay, so I have n plus 4 on top, and then I have n times n plus 2 on the bottom. And that would be your answer. Alright, now I'm going to have you guys do one on your whiteboards. Alright, so what can we factor out of the 6x squared minus 18x? a 6 x, and we're left with x minus 3. And then x squared plus 4x plus 3 is what? X plus 3 times x plus 1. So there's the top. On the bottom, we can factor out a 12x squared, and then we're left with x plus 1. And then x squared minus 9 is x plus 3 times x minus 3. So now when you start going through it, our x plus 1's cancel out, x plus 3's cancel out, x minus 3's cancel out. I'm just left with the 6x over 12x squared. And 6 can be divided by 6, goes into itself once, and goes into 12 twice. So now I'm left with x over 2x squared, right? And then we reduce it. Are there more x's on the top or the bottom? On the bottom, so we leave behind a 1 on top, and we have 2x on the bottom. All right, so now we're going to talk about dividing. Dividing rational expressions is just like dividing fractions. You take the reciprocal of the second fraction and you multiply it, then you divide out the common factors and simplify it. All right, so instead of writing x minus 2 over 2x, now I'm going to have 1 over x times 2x over x minus 2. So all that cancels out on this one are the x's. And so I'm left with 2 over x minus 2. So we take the reciprocal and multiply it, divide out the common factors, and then simplify it by multiplying across. All right, so here's one for your whiteboards. Okay, so when we flip the second one over, is there anything that reduces on this one? No. So we just multiply across. So we have 3 times x minus 5 on top, and then x squared times x cubed is x to the 5th. You could have left it that way, or if you chose to distribute and write 3x minus 15 over x to the 5th, that's also okay. Alrighty, back to your notes. Alright, so on this one, notice that we've got one of them that's backwards. So we're going to probably have an opposite binomial. And so that note there is just to remind you, when you have an opposite binomial, you factor out the negative 1. So let's go through here and factor this. X squared minus 2x, I can take out an x, and I'm left with x minus 2. Oh wait, but first I'm going to rewrite it, the problem, before I do that. Alright, so I'll write it that way first. Alright, so now if I factor it, I take out an x, and I get x minus 2 left in parentheses. And then factoring my x squared plus 2x plus 1, that's just x plus 1 times x plus 1. On the bottom I have an x, and I have a 2 minus x. So I can see that I've got an x minus 2 and a 2 minus x. So what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and take out the negative 1 on the bottom. So I've got x minus 2, x plus 1, x plus 1. On the bottom I'm going to have x times negative 1 times x minus 2. And now that they're both x minus 2, I can cancel out the x minus 2's. And then these x's also cancel out. So I'm just left with a negative 1 times x plus 1 times x plus 1. And since they're the same factor, you can write it x plus 1 squared. And so that would be your answer. Well, dividing by negative 1 is the same as multiplying by negative 1. So I don't really need to leave it as a fraction. It's going to be the same. It's still going to come out negative. Okay? All right, so on your whiteboards, here's one for you guys. Okay, so the 1 minus n squared becomes 1 plus n times 1 minus n, and that's over n. And then the other one is n times n minus 4 over n minus 1. Does everybody agree with that? Okay, I've got opposite binomials again. I've got an n minus 1 and a 1 minus n. So if I change that 1 minus n into negative 1 times n minus 1, now I can cancel out my n minus 1's. And then I can also cancel out the n's. And so what I'm left with on top is negative 1, and then n plus 1, or if you write 1 plus n, that's also okay, and n minus 4. And everything's gone on the bottom. So that would be your final answer. Okay? All right, so when you guys were dividing by a whole number on your 5-a-days, remember how the first one, it was divided by 12? What did you do with that 12? You put it over 1. So you're going to do the same thing when you divide by a binomial. We're just going to put it over 1. And then we can flip it over. So I'll have 3a squared b over b times 1 over 3a squared plus 6a. And I'm going to go ahead and factor that bottom one. And so I can take out a 3a, and I'm left with a plus 2. All right. Now if I start reducing, I can see that my b's are going to cancel out, and my 3's are going to cancel out. And then one of the a's on top will cancel out, and I'm just left with a. So the answer ends up being a over a plus 2. Okay. Any questions? All right, here's one for you guys to do. 4xy squared over y divided by 2x squared plus 6x. Okay, so when we flipped it over and multiplied across, we end up with 4xy squared over y times 2x times x plus 3. So 4 and 2 can reduce. The x's can cancel out. And I've got one more y on top, so that becomes y. And so I'm left with 2y on top and x plus 3 on the bottom. Okay, so what's the first thing you're going to do when you have a division problem? You're going to flip take the reciprocal of which one? The first or the second? The second. Take the reciprocal of the second, and then it's just like the multiplication problems we've been doing. Okay? Any questions? All right, that's it for today then.